Hi folks, this is Max from Hi on Android.com. So I've been waiting to do this video for a while. The video of this title should be why you should choose Android over iOS, or why I did personally. It's not that I hate Apple or Steve Jobs or anything like that, but it's how much I loved something else, which is I'll tell you the whole story. So I think it was 10 years ago. About 10 years ago, I just graduated from college, and I took a college programming class, and that's the first time I learned about Minix, and also Linux, which is, well, I knew about it, but I didn't know the story behind it. Linux is basically branched off the Minix, which is like Minix is basically educational Unix software that was open source by Robert somebody. Anyway, Linus Torvalds, him and several other developers took that Minix and made Linux and open sourced it, so everybody could develop this Linux operating system. And back then, nobody thought Linux would become big. And but I thought it would become big. I thought one day everybody would have a Linux system instead of Windows or Mac in their house. So I was so excited about it. And one of my dreams was to work at a company that used Linux for embedded systems. So after college, I moved on to other things, and then I couldn't get a job here because job market sucks here, and unless you have a lot of connections and experience, you'll have a tough time getting a good job, even as a computer engineer. So I went to Korea. Since I speak fluent Korean. I knew I could get a job there, and they needed people. If I could speak English and new computers, I literally I went applied, and I got hundreds of jobs. So I chose this one company called Confile Technology. They basically make these embedded microcomputers. They don't use Linux, but I figured somehow, like, if I get in, well, that was the only company I could get in, because I wasn't like super good at Linux or anything. So anyway, I worked for there, and that was one of my dreams, that I wanted to work at a company. Well, not a company, I just wanted to work with Linux systems because that's what interests me. And then I came back here, and I was running Confile for a little bit, and then somehow I became a blogger and made a living blogging on my Zetomax.com. And while I was doing that, I had this thought that I think that's when I got the Palm Pre. And I was like, wow, I like this Palm Pre's based on Linux, by the way. I really loved the phone. And then I didn't really know about Google's Android then until Nexus 1 came out with everything like kind of better than the G1 phone. And I knew, and Android was running Linux. Android is Linux, by the way. It's Java virtual machine running on top of Linux, but you can pretty much say it's a Linux machine because it's running on top of Linux kernels. So that's why I really love Android, not because I could give a shit about Apple and iOS and all this stuff, because they're really greedy, and I don't know, I don't care how much money you make. I have more respect for Linus Torvalds, the inventor of Linux. Well, the leader of Linux, because he could have, licensed Linux, sold it to a bunch of private companies for billions of dollars. He probably made like at least 10 times more than Steve Jobs ever did. But his whole idea, philosophy in life was that he wanted to give back to society. He wanted free, he wanted to spread the word that, free, open source, and, he wanted to make the world more better, by, sharing sharing code. Instead of like Windows, is everything closed source, or Apple, everything's closed source. I mean, Android is kind of closed source where the Java runtime is, but as far as the Linux kernels are, it's fully open sourced. So that's why I like Android, and and that's why we have so many different ROMs for Android, and kernels. And you can't do that on Android iOS. How many ROMs can you install on iOS? One. iOS, that's it. That's why they call it iOS, because there's only one. Versus Android, these developers can customize their kernels, install, overclock their phones. You can't do that on, Apple iPhones. The developers, they can totally change the UI. You got the MyUI, they totally changed out the whole operating system. So there's the idea is endless. But what I'm saying is that this is actually good for the educational community of all those kids that are growing up, and if they work with Android, they're gonna learn so much more than working with a closed system like iOS. iOS, you can't reinvent it. Only Apple can reinvent it. Linux kernels and all this, Android and Linux, anyone can reinvent it, reuse it, reformulate it, put it into a new device. It can last decades versus iOS. Apple's engineers make it. So that is number one reason I chose Android. Unlike some people say, I don't hate Apple, I don't hate Steve Jobs, but I love Android, and it's so much better than Apple. And that's my life story, and that's what I'm doing. And for some reason, I happen to be traveling at the right speed at the right time, and the Android was just coming up, and somehow I was making YouTube videos, I was doing blogging, and that's why you're watching my channel. I don't even know how I ended up here, but that's why I love Android. Isn't it? That's why I don't like Apple, because Apple sucks. It's not good for our society. It's only good for Apple. They can make billions, but it's not really good for education. It's only making them rich. Versus Android is running Linux kernels. A lot of things are open source. People can learn from it, develop on top of it. And you know what? That's what I've been realizing, that day has come. 10 years ago, I predicted that there would be a day everybody would have an Linux system, but it ended up in one of these smartphones that you carry. It's actually a Linux device, and it worked out better than I did. Now there's millions of people carrying Linux, and they don't know this is Linux, but it's actually, Android would not exist without Linux, and that's why I support it. Anyway, that's why you should choose Android over Apple. Aside from everything, it's better for the society to have open source than making rich richer, or greedy people greedier. What's the point in that? So I wish you can take something from it, and if you're an Apple fanboy, think about it. Is it my kids? They're gonna grow up and they're gonna keep purchasing iOS, or they're gonna learn. I don't know. I'm just saying, this is how I really feel, and this is the real reason behind why I buy all these Android devices, because I support open source, and that's it, I guess. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed my show. That's the reason behind all these things I'm doing, and Android and Linux, we're doing it, I think. See y'all later. And don't forget to hit that like button and share this video. Why you should choose Android over iOS. Maybe you can help me with the revolution of spreading the word of why you should choose Android over iOS. Got kind of long there. See y'all later.